Hey, hi, welcome.
All right, so we are still in Flawed Masterpiece, this summer series that we are going through. And as we see Chap going over 2 Kings chapter 22 and what it looks like to look at the context of this chapter, and we dive into Josiah's life, is to simply read a little bit ahead and read a little bit after. So that could look like reading chapter 21 and chapter 23, and just the overarching narrative of where this scene is taking place and what is going on in the life of Israel and what is going on in the life of Josiah as he becomes a king at the age of 8.
Sure.
So we just pick up the story in chapter 22, but to look at the historical context is just to read a little bit more and get the overarching context.
Yeah, so here's the value of that. When you look at the story of Josiah in particular in a specific fashion, you see a king coming to power and really kind of righting the ship that was wronged because of some wicked kings beforehand. But that wicked kings beforehand, and understanding the history of Israel and what happened for several kings before who did evil in the sight of the Lord, is important in understanding why Josiah, when he discovered this ancient text when they were going through the temple, why that revelation was so important in him trying to steer back. Without the context of what had happened from David and then his children and beyond that, we don't quite understand the gravity of what's happening in Josiah's case, and point an example in Josiah's case. Then if you look at a few chapters after, and you can see, okay, well, what's the legacy of this passage and what happened after? So that's why it's important to look at the historical context. And as Troy said, reading a little bit before and after is the first step in evaluating historical context. The second step is might need a little Google search. And the amazing thing is there are so many online commentaries that you can look at to find out historically what was happening around this time period, because to recognize where we're at in history of Josiah trying to right the wrong that happened, but before really the collapse of Israel, is actually, I think, insightful for us and to look at this passage and to say, okay, what is happening in the culture at large? Not just in the story that the biblical author gave, but what is happening in society that really influenced them and their process. Because if you actually do a study on all the different kings that existed, that you see through the book of 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, most of them did wicked in the eyes of the Lord. And even as you get to the further years up to a point of the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC, they increasingly became more and more wicked, and they fell away from God. And when you take that meta-narrative that's happening, look at the history, you begin to understand the pattern of what God is trying to do. And God is not just this angry tyrant, but God is trying to help a people who are broken, who are in pain, who are actually hurting themselves and others, and trying to course correct that. So again, I'm talking a lot, but the hope is look at the historical context. Feel free to use Google as a tool and explore that with your group as to what was really happening then and there, and sit in that before you get to the here and now.
Yeah, exactly. And that might feel like a lot to chew right now, but that is the importance, and that's actually what extrapolates this beauty in the text, and especially the Old Testament and in the New Testament. But exactly what Scott is going through right now just brings this text alive. And like you said, how knowing more about what was then and there, and that's the importance, is knowing what happened then and there. Now you can know how to apply it here and now. And I think that is the most important thing about historical context and the hermeneutical practices, is learning what it meant to them so we could find out what it means to us.
So in your guide are a few cheater websites that will give you some commentaries to help give you some of that historical context that are going on, as well as some questions that will really help you ask and dive into what was happening, why was it happening, for you to understand and create a revelation of the text you're looking at. In our case, Josiah and his life.
Yeah.
Enjoy. Have fun.